Hello, this is Dragon Keeper 19600 here, and welcome to another film review. And so, you know how in my last film review for Pirates of the Caribbean, Dead Men Tell No Tales, I mentioned that I would be doing some kind of movie review this weekend, and I said it would probably be Captain Underpants. Turns out I lied. I saw Wonder Woman today. Yes, the reviews for both movies are really good, but I thought Wonder Woman was doing so well that, it was kind of a big deal that a movie starring a female superhero and no other superheroes, like Wonder Woman is the only superhero that appears in this movie, was a big enough deal that I would go see that instead and pay a ticket, even though I could have gotten in for free since I work at a theater now. But I did pay for a ticket. So, Wonder Woman. I started off my last review by telling you what some people I met thought about it, so I'll start the same way today. So, as you know, I work at a theater, and I usher, and I clean up the theater afterwards. So, when the theater drops, I'm standing by the door, and I'm watching the people that come out. And Wonder Woman just came out, so a lot of people saw it today, and most everyone seemed really happy. Like, with Pirates of the Caribbean, some people seemed really happy, and some people, looked not so much. But with Wonder Woman, pretty much everybody was, super excited. I remember in particular, I was standing outside the theater, and this one old guy comes up to me, this really adorable old man, comes up to me, and he's holding these 3D glasses, because he just came out of a 3D show, and he's like, excuse me, where do I put these? And I'm like, well, I'll just take them. He's like, oh, thanks. By the way, because some old people are, chatty. And he's like, I just saw Wonder Woman, and it was awesome. I think awesome was the exact word he used. And I'm like, really? He's like, yeah, it was so good. I wanted to see Churchill, but I didn't realize that it was actually at the other theater. And my wife was like, well, why didn't you see Wonder Woman instead? And so we did, and it was so cool. And I'm like, oh, that's terrific. So I didn't even know what Churchill was. I had to look it up. I'm like, you mean like Winston Churchill? I'm like, yes, it's a biopic about Winston Churchill. And it's at the Angelica, which is the fancy theater around here where they show art films. And apparently it sucks. It has a 37% on IMDb, a whole 7 points ahead of Pirates of the Caribbean, Dead Men Tell No Tales. So, yeah, it's a good thing for that old guy that he saw Wonder Woman today instead of Churchill. Wonder Woman, a film that mostly takes place several decades before Churchill became prime minister. Anyway, so, everybody loves this movie, and I love it too, and it's just a really exciting day for cinema and for superheroes and for DC, who have had their first pretty much universally beloved movie of the DC expanded universe, DC cinematic universe, the Diku. So, anyway, why do people love this movie so much? Well, first of all, let me just go ahead and start by recapping the story like I always do. So this movie has a minor framing device. So you know how Wonder Woman has appeared in other DC films, she appeared in Batman vs. Superman. She's scheduled to appear in Justice League pretty soon. Those films take place in modern day. But this movie has sort of a full movie flashback where Diana is working in the modern day Louvre, and Batman actually sends her a case that has a photo in it. And apparently this photo appeared in Batman vs. Superman, but I never saw that, so I don't know. And it depicts her and 4 other men. It's a black and white photo from the end of World War I, and they're all staring straight at the camera, and the photo looks pretty damaged when she gets it, so that causes her to flashback about who these men are and how she met them and how she saved the day and got introduced to the modern world and such. So, when Wonder Woman was a little girl, Wonder Girl, she grew up on this island called Themyscira, where the Amazons live. It's a nation of only women. A lot of comic book geeks know this already, but I feel like I have to go over it. And the Amazons are a race of warriors, but there hasn't been a war in a long time, but just in case, they keep up their training, sword fighting, shield, arrow, such. And Diana, at the age of maybe 8, loves it. She can't get enough. The first we see of her is her abandoning her tutor to run off and watch the women train. And her mother chases her down Diana, you're supposed to be studying right now. You can't be training. You're just a little girl. And, there's this general who works for the queen named, I think, Antiope. I saw it spelled out, like in reviews and such, so I don't remember if that's how they pronounce it in the film, but it looks like it's pronounced Antiope. And she wants to train Diana because Diana shows real potential and she definitely has interest, but the mom says no. Because Diana's just a little girl and the island of Themyscira is perfectly peaceful and there's no reason to ever leave it and there's no more wars anymore and that part of their history is behind them. And this is the part where I started thinking, wait a minute. This is the plot of Moana. Like, literally, it's no different except you replace Moana's love of the sea with Diana's love of killing people. Like, that's the only difference. It's the same. And to be fair, the movie doesn't follow a Moana plot structure except for the first 10 minutes. But for the first 10 minutes, I was like, this is just Moana, but with a superhero. And Moana was kind of a superhero since she can kind of influence the ocean. Like, what the hell is this? Why have I seen 2 movies in 1 week that both take plot elements from Moana? Is this just a weird coincidence? I don't understand anything. But anyway, so to convince Diana that war is bad, which she seems quite skeptical of, being an 8-year-old, and feeling, as 8-year-olds do, that she's on top of the world, Hippolyta, the queen, and her mom tells her a story. And the story goes like this. Millennia and millennia ago, Zeus, that Zeus, created humanity, and humanity was basically good and wonderful and loving all the time. But his son, Ares, who was a dick, became jealous of humanity and didn't think they were worthy of the love of the gods, and so corrupted them and influenced them so that there was hatred and violence in their hearts. So they started fighting each other because of Ares. So Zeus, I think, created a second race who were the Amazons, and they were supposed to broker peace, but they didn't. And so they had to fight for their lives against Ares' poison humans, and Ares went on, I think, to kill every single god except Zeus, who managed to strike, with his dying breath, managed to strike a severely wounding blow against Ares, apparently getting rid of him for thousands of years. But Hippolyta is convinced that Ares will someday come back, and that it's the Amazons' job, as the peacekeepers of the world, to get rid of them once and for all. And Zeus apparently blessed the Amazons with a weapon called the God Killer. And if Hippolyta's goal was to convince Diana that war is bad, she failed pretty hard because the first thing Diana asks after she finishes the story is, "Can I see the God Killer?" Oh, sweetheart. No, but she does. She shows it to her as a shiny sword. Yay, she says, "This is for the strongest among us. That's not you, Diana." And that's kind of a scene that they have in the trailer of him, her smiling wickedly after her mother says that, like, "Oh, isn't it?" Just watch me. I'm gonna put my hands all over. I'm gonna lick it. But whatever. So Diana grows up, and her mother eventually approves her training because, first of all, she finds out that Antiope is training Diana behind her back, and she gets mad. But then Antiope explains, look, she's good, and she's supposed to be the one who saves us all and defeats Ares. If I don't train her, Ares is gonna, just kind of flip her like a pancake. And Hippolyta's like, okay, but you have to train her so that she's stronger than everybody, even you. So she went from don't train her to train her until she drops. Okay, it's a little schizophrenic, Mom. But eventually, a World War I fighter pilot named Steve Trevor sails into the island, which is uncharted and that no man has ever found. And his plane wrecks in the water, but Diana saves him. And when we're talking about Disney princesses, I went right from this is like Moana to this is like Little Mermaid when she pulls Steve onto the beach and she's standing over him to make sure she's breathing, and she's never seen a man before. She's seen drawings and illustrations, but she's never seen a man in person before. So she's standing over him, and the sun is right behind her, and she's mostly in silhouette, though her features are a little clearer than a Little Mermaid. Steve wakes up and he sees this beautiful woman leaning over him, and he just goes, wow. So it turns out Steve has been working as a spy for the, I guess you wouldn't say allies for World War II, for London, basically. He seems to live in London, even though he has an American accent. For the British. And he discovered that there's this new kind of gas, like the deadly mustard gas, that is being developed by this German scientist named Dr. Moreau. And he has to deliver the notes, because he swiped Dr. Moreau's notes, to the generals in London so that they can decide what to do about it, even though the war looks like it's going to wind to an end pretty soon, like the Germans are already losing. But Steve wants to take this to them to save any more lives that might be lost due to this gas, or could even possibly turn the tide of the war last minute in the Germans' favor. And the Amazons have no idea what World War I is, so as he's explaining this to them, Diana remembers the stories from her childhood and becomes convinced that Ares is on the side of the Germans and is influencing the war to make the Germans violent. And that if she can track down Ares in modern 1917 Europe and kill him, the war will end. And honestly, that's the biggest source of intrigue in the movie. How right is Diana about Ares? For one thing, there's this whole plot throughout the movie, Diana is clearly a fish out of water, both temporal and culturally. She shows up in London, looks around, and her first comment is, "It's hideous!" Which, to be fair, is accurate. But it's like a typical London sky, meaning gray and ditchy. And, London looks cool, though, from a cinematic point of view. They sail under the bridge, and it, looms over them. It's wow. But, and, she doesn't know how to dress. She doesn't know what to eat. She doesn't really know proper etiquette. She doesn't know anything. So there's a sense that she might be dead wrong, and there might be no such thing as Ares. But most people in Europe would say no, there's no such thing as Themyscira and the island of the Amazons. And, the idea that, she's just, that she's completely clueless is just proven early on when she's, really good at the battlefield, blocking bullets with her manacles and such. And, so people start thinking, is it true? Is Ares real? And is he influencing the Germans? And if she kills him, will that end everything? And I honestly don't want to spoil at this point what becomes of that subplot. Maybe I will later when I want to talk more about more spoiler stuff. But I was really intrigued throughout the movie, because there's this idea every time. Okay, they had to use World War I for this plot because in World War II there is a clear bad guy. It's Hitler and the Nazis. I think Zero Punctuation, Yahtzee Croshaw, if you know him from Zero Punctuation, he made a comment that most stories, narratives, be they film or video games, tend to use World War II because World War II is basically a feel-good, we're the good guys story. And it's one of the few wars in human history that can be perceived that way. The Nazis are irredeemably evil. And even if not every single Nazi was irredeemably evil, their ideology certainly was, and we absolutely are completely in the right for having stopped them. So we can, have the heroes on the Allies just mow down Nazis, and there's, no moral quandary about it, because you could pretty much do anything you want to a Nazi, and it's considered morally sound. World War I isn't like that. It's just a tangled mess of countries all fighting each other for reasons that they don't even remember. And I remember thinking in the movie, of course, Ares murdered Duke Franz Ferdinand. That is exactly why this war... No. But with this war, when Diana sees, all those atrocious things, she is convinced that it is all because of Ares. The reason these humans who are supposed to be perfect are killing each other, slaughtering children, bombing people that they can't even see... and Diana has this idea that there's this thing about honor is that you're supposed to know who you kill. One soldier tells her that's better if you don't so you can sleep at night, but she says that's not honorable, which is another difference in cultural ideology. But anyway, so it's it's obviously building up to something that she's convinced that people are good and they're just being corrupted to do bad by this supernatural force. So I do want to talk about the acting real quick. Wonder Woman is played by Gal Gadot. I'm not sure if that's how you pronounce that name. It's spelled Gadot. And I believe she's the same woman who plays her in Batman versus Superman, because it wouldn't be much of an expanded universe if it wasn't the same actress. Steve is played by Chris Pine, who you might remember as Captain Kirk in the new Star Trek movies. And they're both great, and they have chemistry, and they have, like, this great, like, it's obviously a blossoming romance, but there's this thing where, like, he has to, like, basically play tour guide and explain to her a lot of things about modern life that she doesn't get, but also sometimes she kind of surprises him with what she does know. For instance, there's no marriage in Themyscira, but there is sex. So he's like starting to like awkwardly explain to her what sex is, and she's like, "Are you referring to the pleasures of the flesh?" In her amazing accent that I love. He's like, "Yeah." It's like, "Oh, I thought we'd have to explain this to you, but okay." Well, first she asks, "Are you talking about biological reproduction?" Like, so she knows what sex is, and she knows what, she's a polyglot. I should mention that too. All the Amazons speak hundreds of languages, according to Diana. So this actually comes out where she has to translate the notes that Dr. Maru wrote, and they're written in Sumerian and Ottoman. And she can read them because she knows, like, every language. And, of course, she can fight really well. So, like, people, like, think, like, she's clueless, and then she, like, trolls them with, like, amazing competency. But yes, the acting. They're really good and really charming. And there's other characters. Like, there were several men in the photo with Wonder Woman. Basically, Steve and Diana have to organize, like, a small strike team because since peace is so close, they don't want to go into German territory to destroy these, like, gas weapons. And even though that the weapons going off at the tail end of the war will kill a bunch of people, they don't think it's enough to make the Allies lose, or the Western powers lose the war, so they're just going to go ahead and let it go off and not interfere so that the armistice can go through without any problems. So they organize a crew, a motley crew, if you will, of what's his name? A Moroccan named Samir, I think is his name, Samir. A Scotsman named Charlie, a Native American guy that they just called Chief, and their mangy dog. No, they don't have a dog. And basically every time, they all do great, by the way. They're all really charming characters. And but they've all experienced war and the limitations of war in different ways. And every time Diana learns about how bad war is, it's one of the highlights of the film. Like, there's one point where they're all camping out before they go to the front lines in Belgium. And Charlie is apparently asleep, but in the middle of their conversation, he suddenly starts to have a PTSD flashback. Like, he's like, he, like, ducks to the ground, and, like, Diana tries to, like, soothe him and tell him that he's safe, but he, like, shoves her away and runs off, and, like, that's a side of war that Diana hasn't seen because she's never really seen war. There's one moment early on where the Germans, who have pursued Steve into the island of Themyscira, I love saying that name, Themyscira, it sounds cool, they start, like, shooting because that's what they do. They're soldiers, they don't know where they are, shoot. So the Amazons come out to defend them, and they've never seen guns before. Like, the Amazons beat the Germans, but they lose a few people because they've never seen guns, and it takes them a minute to realize what they do. And the Germans have been fighting hard too, like, they're experienced. They don't have hundreds of years of experience, but they have fought more recently than the Amazons. So someone shoots, and you see the bullet, like, move in slow motion. And the Amazons, like, have this thing where they, like, drop down from the cliff using chains and they swing. And I thought it was, like, 3D maneuver gear, like, from Attack on Titan. So basically, Diana, who has, like, bullet time vision, is one of her powers. She, like, watches the bullet go, and it hits another Amazon in the stomach, and she just hangs from the chain and, like, swings back and forth. And Diana's, like, staring wide-eyed. And I thought that was a really good moment, that, like, where no dialogue was said, because basically the Amazons are ageless. They can live for hundreds, maybe thousands of years and not age a day. The only one who seems to age is Diana, and considering she's the same age in 1917 as she is in 2017, she clearly stopped aging at some point, so I don't know how old she actually is. That's the first time Diana's ever seen anyone die. And, like, they communicate that really well, but she never says that, and she doesn't say it in the following scene, but it was all clear in just that horrified look that she gives, and the body is just like, she's brought up this idea that fighting is cool because it's justified. You're fighting for peace and love and all that stuff. And the way the body swings is like very unglamorous, whereas the story she's been told about war and the visions of the Amazons fighting are glamorous. Not that this movie never portrays war as unglamorous, as glamorous. There's this maxim, I don't remember where it's from, that it's impossible to truly make an anti-war film because you have to show the war at some point, and cinema is all about making things look cool. So at some point, you have to make war look kind of cool. And there is a lot of just reveling in the glory of violence. So, like, there's this, basically the Amazons, including Diana, fight basically like the Spartans in 300 fight. Like, they do like those crazy flips and the sword moves, and like there's like, it'll like go at regular speed and it'll slow down to like a crawl. The fight choreography is really good. Like, sometimes it gets a little bit ridiculous. Like, sometimes it looks silly. Like, I get that Diana's super strong and she can jump really far and she's got all these powers, but at one point she jumps and she like, one of her favorite tactics is to jump and smash through a building or through a closed window, and it looks amazing because the part of the building she smashed through just flies apart. It's kind of evocative of the Kool-Aid Man. It's like, boom! Like, holy shit. There's one particular scene where there's a sniper up in a bell tower. Diana jumps up to get him, like 5 floors, and the whole top of the tower explodes. Like, Jesus Christ, calm down. Or don't, whatever. This is great. Keep going, Diana. You're great. I also mentioned, let me talk about the fish out of water moments for a bit, because that's the main source of humor in this film. Now, this film isn't as preoccupied with being funny as, say, Dead Men Tell No Tales. There are jokes, but they're not the point, and they're, like, rarely sprinkled out. So, basically, Diana sails away from Themyscira in her Wonder Woman garb with a black cloak over it. And Steve tells her, like, you can't wear that. Okay, we have to get you some day wear. So, watching Wonder Woman struggle with women's clothing is one of the jokes, where she's wearing stuff and she is complaining that it doesn't fit right, and there's one scene where she's wearing a pencil skirt, and she's like. And the lady, Edda, who is Steve's secretary, is helping her with it. She's like, oh, that looks good on you. And Diana, lifts one leg to see if she can move her, and she rips it, into 3 pieces. She's like, okay, maybe not. And I love, Steve comes up later. It's like, how's Diana? Where's Diana? And Edda's like, oh, she's trying on outfit number 267. She says it so casually. I love Edda. She doesn't get a whole lot of scenes, but I love her. And, just watching her, because, Amazons walk around in armor, and, very skimpy armor all the time. So having her try on things that are not meant to be moved around a whole lot is funny. And it's, kind of a commentary on how ridiculous women's clothing is. And I get this from 100 years ago, but a lot of the problems, the complaints she has still stand. Things don't fit right, you can't move in them, it doesn't even have pockets, what the fuck. And, there's another bit I like where she's walking by the train station because they're about to leave for Belgium, and she walks by someone who's selling ice cream, and he holds it out to her, and Steve's like, okay, I'll go ahead and buy you some ice cream, and she takes a bite and she goes, you should be very proud. She tells the guy he should be proud. It was cute. But there are other points where it's played for drama. Like I mentioned earlier, the general in London is okay with letting the mustard gas go off without interfering because the war is almost over anyway. And when Steve points out that a lot of people are going to die, the general says they're soldiers and that's what they do. And Diana loses it. She's It's an amazing rant, and I wish I could quote the whole thing, but honestly, listening to Gal say it is better. So I'm just going to tell you the gist. She basically says that General's wrong for valuing his life over the soldiers, and that thousands of people dying, letting thousands of people die when you can prevent it is cowardly. And in her culture, generals fight alongside the soldiers. They don't hide in their offices and send people up to die without a second thought, and that you should be ashamed, and like all the, like, and Steve has to like bodily drag her out. And that's actually like, it's sort of a sign of how much war has changed, that like the conventions of warfare have changed from like ancient Greece. But also, Diana's completely right about all that stuff. Like, it is cowardly to just let thousands of people die. It is cowardly to value foot soldiers' lives above your own and to think that dying is just what people do. Like, a lot of those soldiers are teenagers, something that the movie actually portrays. And, but I love it when Steve drags her out, and then she, like, gets on to him for standing there doing nothing and letting them order him to basically sit tight. He admits that they're going to Belgium anyway, regardless of the orders. And Diana's like, "You mean you lied?" And she sounds just as aggravated about that. So I did have a bit of a problem with this plot device, because basically Wonder Woman still needs a man. And I know how that sounds, but she basically still needs a guy to, like, explain modern life to her and tell her, "No, wait, stop. I need you to not do that for a second." And it is kind of weird that she has a minder, but it's kind of confusing because he isn't always right. And it's kind of unclear about what Diana is right about and what she's not. Like, I already mentioned the intrigue around Ares. Like, is Ares really influencing the war? Will killing him really stop everything? Who is Ares if he's somebody on either side? Like, she doesn't, like, we don't know how right she is about that. I mean, she's right about being able to block. There's, like, a few times where, you know, Steve is like, "No, stay back, I'll fight." Like, when German spies attack them, he, like, tries to block her, and, like, then she gets her silver bullet blocking gauntlet in front of him and blocks the shot and ends up, like, doing more damage in the battle than he does. And he's like, "Okay, never mind." So it's, like, weird, like, who's supposed to be right about anything at any given time. So it's not quite like, it's not 100% like Wonder Woman has basically a minder, but it is kind of something I noticed, that Wonder Woman doesn't do this solo, but then no superhero really saves the day solo. So I guess it's fine. Whoops. I dropped that 1 second. So there are a few weird things about this movie that don't make a whole lot of sense. For one, I'm pretty sure they're making up that Greek mythology. Like, Zeus created humanity to be perfect. Okay. Second of all, Themyscira doesn't seem to have really a great defense system. Like, there's like this bubble around it, and it looks like a clear, beautiful blue sky when you're looking out from Themyscira, but when you're looking in, it looks like fog. Okay, fair enough. Except that the Amazons can't see anything that's approaching until it's already crossed the threshold. Like, what the fuck? So basically, from their perspective, the enemy Germans and the plane carrying Steve just appeared the fuck out of nowhere. Like, what's the... And it's not like the barrier in, like, something like Undertale where things can only pass through it one way. People can easily pass through it either way. It's like, well, it's a fancy cloaking device, but it also kind of hinders the Amazons, because instead of the Germans being surprised when they come across an island full of women armed to the teeth, and the women are ready for them, now both the Amazons and the Germans are surprised to see each other at the same time. So that kind of is a tactical advantage you could have that's lost. That's weird. Another thing that's weird is Dr. Moreau. Remember I mentioned her? They call her Dr. Poison because she develops the mustard gas. First of all, Dr. Poison is a terrible name. I know that there's a real-life scientist lady who they nicknamed Dr. Germ because she develops biological warfare. I think that's a stupid name, too. I know she's a real person. She's a real terrorist. I don't care. It's a dumb name. Dr. Poison. But also, on the left side of her face, she has, like, this weird, like, clay mask with, like, joints in it so she can talk. And it's only on the left lower side of her face. Apparently, it's to cover up a deformity, but it's like, why does she have that? And it honestly created kind of an accidental red herring for me, because I sort of vaguely remember some Wonder Woman lore. I did read the first few like comics detailing her origin, like from the Golden Age, and I remember she did have a twin sister. Like her mom sculpted 2 babies, and one of them was stolen. So I'm like, oh, is that Wonder Woman's sister? No, she's just a German lady with clay on her face. So yeah, I guess I should talk about the villains, the Germans. Even though this is a movie with the message war is hell and people are complicated, this movie does have villains on the German side. First of all, there's Dr. Moreau. Second of all, there's this German general named Ludendorff, the most German name you can imagine. And I actually like him. He like has this weird philosophy about how war makes you stronger, and you're cowards for letting the war end, even though it's very obvious that Germany is losing, blah, blah, blah. But I also there's one scene I like where the new gas that Dr. Moreau has developed is hydrogen-based, which means that gas mask won't work on it. So basically, he walks into the room, and like this room full of other German war officials, and basically does like the cliched, you don't agree with me, so I'm going to kill you all to show how evil I am. That's a scene like that is in a lot of movies. So he basically throws a canister of Dr. Moreau's gas, and then throws a single gas mask into the room, and then closes the door. And Dr. Moreau is like, the gas mask is useless. And he's like, but they don't know that. So he's watching these men scramble for the gas mask that won't save them, and Dr. Moreau is laughing along with him. I just love how almost childishly, like, it's clever and sadistic and evil, but it's also kind of immature. The way they're just laughing at these guys scrambling for the mask. It's, yep. So, movie's good, got some good action, good message, good acting, a few corny moments and a few corny lines, but there's so much other good stuff that you're willing to forgive them. And this is the point where I want to talk about more spoilery stuff. So, if this review has made you interested in seeing this movie, seeing what's going on with Ares and with Wonder Woman and with Steve, and why Batman sent her a picture in the mail in a briefcase. No, it wasn't in the mail. He had one of his business guys deliver it to her. You could stop watching this video and go see the movie and then come back, because I'm going to talk about some other scenes I don't want to ruin. So there's this moment where Diana has been insistent on being taken to the heart of where the fighting is, because she's convinced that there she will find Ares. So they take her to the front, which means they take her to the trench. And trench warfare is something I'm pretty sure did not exist in ancient Greece. Hell, it was pretty much a new thing in this war. And Diana can't understand, like, why are we hiding in this hole? Why are we shooting these people across there? She comes across these refugees who are from the village that's being held hostage by the Germans nearby, and the woman in French begs her to help them, not really knowing who she is, because Wonder Woman hasn't really become a household name at this point. She's like, just like, help me. And, and she says, like, they've held our village hostage, and they've enslaved all these women and children, and Diana's like, well, we have to go, we have to save them, and, Steve is like, no, we can't. It's too dangerous. Like, these men are trying to save them. That's what all the shooting and hiding in this hole is about. But, we can't help them, and they haven't, like, made an inch in, like, months. Like, you can't save everybody in a war. And, like, out there is no man's land. Like, basically, the place between the enemy trenches is called no man's land. So Diana's like, someone's got to do something, and she's determined to save the day. So she climbs out of the trench and stands up next to the trench. And Steve and the other men are like, what are you doing? And then, in a scene that I'm pretty sure is going to be a lot of people's favorite scene in any movie, especially a lot of women's favorite scene in any movie, Diana starts walking slowly toward the Germans' trench. They shoot at her, she blocks. They shoot at her again, she blocks again. They shoot more at her, she just keeps going. And the men are realizing she's gaining ground and drawing all the fire. So Steve, Samir, Chief, and Charlie all charge out of the trench. And they actually, with Wonder Woman in the lead, using her manacles and her shield, are able to make it across into the other trench. And then, it gets good, because then they're in the town, which is occupied by German soldiers. And that's where the scene that I was talking about, where she smashes through the top tower of the church is. And it's basically an amazing sequence from start to finish. There's one, like, amazing callback that I like. First of all, this is another case of the film, like, having, like, nonverbal, basically being able to get ideas across without dialogue. So early in the film, we when the Amazons are fighting the Germans, one woman shouts, "Shield!" And you think that's a cue that means toss me a shield. That's not what it is. When a warrior shouts "shield," what that means is another warrior is supposed to lean down and hold up their shield like this, and then the lady who shouts "shield" runs and jumps off the shield using it as a springboard for an aerial attack, and it's awesome. So, like, and they conveyed that that's what that means just by showing them do it, and they don't have anyone comment on it or explain it. And I love storytelling like that. That's exactly the way a film is supposed to be done. So anyway, Steve orders the three other men to hold up, like, a big piece of, like, metal that looks like it came off somebody's roof. And they're like, "Why are we doing this?" And Steve's like, "Just trust me." So they hold it up and they angle, and Steve shouts, "Diana, shield!" And that's when Diana jumps off of that and jumps into the tower and takes out the sniper. It's so cool, and it was a really cool callback, and it was a really cool action scene. And people are, like, praising Diana, and they're thanking her, and they're, like, taking her hand and shaking it, and there's, like, and that's when the photo of her and the men is snapped. And, I actually like this moment because there's one bit where we see that the chief, who is not from Europe, obviously, claims that he's hiding out and helping the Allies for profit because he doesn't really feel an alliance to either side since, he is Native American and the Americans did take all his land recently enough for him to remember, because this is 1917. And Dan is like, "Oh, who took your people's land from you?" And he's like, "That guy's people." And he points over at Steve. So it's like, Diana learns nuance and that how complicated alliances are, and how, like, someone can be on the side of someone who did something bad, and that doesn't mean that they're completely bad, but it doesn't mean that they're completely good, because they obviously did bad things, and people are complicated, and gray versus gray is the way the world works, and blah, 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 blah. Anyway, so he claims he's in the war just for profit. But then Diana looks over, and she sees, like, people offering him money for basically helping free the town, and he turns them all down. Like, again, with no dialogue, you just see him, like, shaking his head and holding up his hand when they are, like, holding out coins to him, and that's a great scene because it shows he was lying about being in it for profit. He actually does care what happens in this war. He's just, I don't know, maybe he thought it was true. Maybe he's just trying not to get attached. The same reason Samir told her it was better, like, not to know who you kill. Not sure, but I liked that moment. Another one I liked is afterward, Steve is teaching Diana how to dance, which means basically teaching her how to dance like white people dance, because Diana's convinced that the peasants dancing in the village are not really dancing. She's like, "They're just swaying." He's like, "Yeah." So they sway. And then afterward, they go up in their hotel room, and they kiss, and then, like, it cuts outside of their hotel room, and you could see the one lighted window where they are, because there was a light on in the room, and then it cuts to the next morning. That's it. Like, it's a scene that focuses more on the romance than the sex, because it doesn't actually show any sex, or even anything, like, really risque. Like, they're still fully clothed when they kiss, but from the way they're leaning next to each other, it's pretty clear what's happening. And I like scenes that convey eroticism without actually, like, being straight up fan service. Like, not that this movie doesn't have any fan service. Chris Pine is completely freaking naked in an earlier scene with the Amazons. Like, completely. Like, yeah, the point of that was clearly it was supposed to be, like, Diana and Steve's relationship, and not any kind of, like, let's see some skin. Like, it wasn't that. I actually don't want to talk about how this movie ends, because I'm working on getting these reviews a little shorter, bit by bit. And I'm not going to tell you about what happens with the Ares subplot. I think that's good enough and cool enough not to ruin. I will say, though, my earlier point about corniness stands. Like, there are a few times where they say a line or that doesn't work. Like, they basically give the point that love is the answer. Like, Steve gives this passion speech to Diana about how, like, even though people are, like, they're all good and maybe they, like, not that they're all good, they're all not good, and maybe they don't deserve to be saved, but ultimately saving them isn't about whether or not they deserve it, it's about what you believe. And later she says something like, I believe in love, which is a reference to his earlier beautiful speech. And maybe it works in context for some people. For me, it was like, Like, something like that would be a little corny if I heard it in Steven Universe. But when I heard it in Wonder Woman, I was like, okay. But, the fight with the final villain is pretty cool. It's choreographed great. There's a bunch of cool moments, like where Diana's like throwing tanks around and flipping cars. The first time she flipped a car, I was like, she flipped the bitch. It was amazing. And basically Diana is forced to come face to face with her ideas about human morality and how humans behave in war and how that reflects on them and like all this stuff, and becomes older and wiser because of it. And so it's a mature take on the character. I don't know how faithful any of this is to the comics. I read those Golden Age comics a long time ago. One thing I do know that is different is I remember Steve Trevor in the comics was kind of a wuss, like a complete wuss, and they definitely made him much more capable in this movie. Diana saves him, and he's basically, like, completely hapless, and, like, she's the one who has to steer him around and save him all the time. And he's basically, like, a damsel in distress, except he was a dude. And I remember there's one particularly ridiculous scene where, like, he wakes up in a hospital, and Diana, who is in her Diana Prince disguise, Amazons don't have last names, but she uses the last name Prince when she's posing as a human. And basically her Diana Prince disguise is the same as Superman's Clark Kent disguise. It's her in a women's pantsuit and glasses. And he wakes up and he sees her face right in his face, and he says, who are you? Like, who are you? Where is my Wonder Woman? Like, bitch, I'm right here. Like, in the comic, she says, Wonder Woman is closer than you think. Now, hush now. But it was Gal Gadot. She'd be like, come on. What? I'm wearing glasses. Is everyone in the DC universe just completely blinded by glasses? Like, who are you? It's a completely different person. Like, who the hell sees someone with glasses when they've never seen no glasses before, and they're like, who the fuck are you? Nobody would react like that. What do you have, face blindness? I don't know. So yeah, Steve Rogers is completely helpless in the comics, from what I remember. And probably they manned him up more in like the more modern comics, like after the Bronze Age and stuff. But like in the Golden Age, that's how I remember. Before you get too excited, I saw a reprint of the original Wonder Woman comics. It wasn't like an original copy. Like nobody would have let like a 9-year-old touch an original copy of Wonder Woman #1. Anyway. One more thing I want to say is that some superhero movies that take a more mature approach are afraid of the branding. Like, you know, in the super terrible Fantastic Four movie, Fanforstic, which came out a few years ago. I don't remember the exact year, like maybe 2015 or something. They seemed really afraid of the brand. Like, they spend more than half the movie not in the costume. They're never referred to as the Fantastic Four on screen. Here in Wonder Woman, I don't think anyone ever says the words Wonder Woman on screen. They just call her Diana. But Diana has a lot of lofty titles, Princess of the Amazons, and, you know, all that stuff. But they do have the costume, and they are, like, very clearly, like, engrossed in, like, that. And, you know, all the stuff about Greek gods and Ares and, like, the Themyscira, which looks beautiful, by the way. Like, the sun shining on and the white cliffs and the sea crashing against. It's a very pretty looking island. And Wonder Woman's like wearing the iconic outfit with like the tiara and the red like swimsuit thingy and the boots and the gauntlets. And she has the lasso of truth, which apparently I always understood it as more of like a hypnotism thing. Like when it's on you, you have to tell the truth. It has that, but there's like sort of a degree to which someone can resist the lasso, and apparently the longer you resist, the more it burns in your skin. So it compels you and also tortures you, but it isn't like an automatic, you immediately answer whatever question is asked of you, like I remember it being from the comics. But yeah, she has all the gear and the getup, and like a lot of superheroes, especially in the early 2000s, they wore black spandex. Like, they wore, like, black jumpsuits or whatever. Like, the first X-Men movie was especially bad. They all wore just... The whole team wore black. And they weren't willing to, like, embrace the uniform. Not the case in Wonder Woman. They're not afraid of the branding. They're not afraid of the poster, like... Or the title, or, like... some of the sillier elements. Like, this movie isn't as silly as, say, Guardians of the Galaxy. Like, there's a sliding scale of how into the realm of comic book absurdity a movie is willing to go. And, so Wonder Woman is never absurd, but she's also... The film isn't afraid of its own brand. So that's good. One final thing I do want to say, promise this is the final thing, is that this is the first good movie of the DC cinematic universe. Man of Steel was okay, in my opinion, but it had a lot of flaws and a lot of things that didn't make sense and a lot of corny plots and stuff. I didn't see Batman vs. Superman or Suicide Squad, so I can't give you my personal opinions on those. I've heard they both suck. As the first good film of DC, I had a theory that I divulged to a coworker at Cinemark, hi Colton, that basically Wonder Woman has been the first good movie, I said, because DC doesn't care about it. And like with a film like Superman or Batman, they try to nitpick and add all these notes and extra things to the movie. Like we've all heard that Ben Affleck is going to be Batman. Hi Colton, you're on camera. Thank God he's wearing a shirt. Ben Affleck was going to be Batman. He was also going to direct a Batman movie and be a screenwriter for the same movie. But then, if it got out that Ben Affleck was stepping down as director, then we learned he was stepping down as screenwriter, and then it was up in the air whether or not he was going to play Batman at all. And the reason about that is that DC basically micromanaged him to death and made him like change, like, could you change this? Could you introduce this character? Could you portray him like this? And they were constantly trying to like shoehorn as much Batman shit into the movie as possible. I feel like they didn't do that with Wonder Woman. Maybe they learned from previous movies that wasn't the best thing. Maybe Patty, the director, I don't remember her full name. I'll put it on the screen. I feel really embarrassed for not knowing her full name because she's like the most successful female director as of this movie. I don't remember. Whatever. But maybe she held a shotgun every time they tried to suggest something. I don't know. But I was convinced that DC didn't feel like they had as much to lose with Wonder Woman. So in an ironic twist, they gained everything because they didn't interfere with the script. The coworker I suggested this to vehemently disagreed. He said, of course DC cares about Wonder Woman. She's one of their most recognizable heroes, and they realized that this was their chance to finally start the DC cinematic universe the way they wanted, because they made a mistake. They hiccuped with Man of Steel because it wasn't that great a movie. And then after that, they tried to go too fast to catch up where Marvel is currently by introducing tons and tons of characters in one film, too many subplots. He claimed that in Suicide Squad that they introduced characters with like a video game like side scroll where they displayed all their stats. Colton, is that true? In Suicide Squad, did they have like a stat counter next to each new character they introduced?
I mean, they had like neck things in each one, so it showed each character.
Okay, well, if you could decipher that. Neck things?
They had little chips, so if they betrayed the bitch, she would die. They would die.
Oh, interesting. Probably a good measure. Anyway, so yeah, they tried to go too fast and do too much, cram too much into one movie. With Wonder Woman, they were allowed to do it at their own pace. Like, there's only one superhero, and the story is very focused, and there's not like a million subplots jostling for attention. And that worked in the film's favor. So I don't know which one of us was right about why Wonder Woman worked. Maybe neither of us was right. I don't know. Probably someone who knows more about the film would know that stuff. But anyway, whatever the reason, I say Wonder Woman is a huge success, and you should all totally see it. Even if you're not a fan of superhero movies, still consider seeing it because it's a good anti-war movie as well. Even though there is no such thing as an anti-war movie, this movie does try, and it does have some good messages about, the state of human nature. And also, you should eat Apple Jacks, because they're a delicious cereal with cinnamon and apple in the taste. I remember when I was a kid, that was part of the advertising that there's no apple flavoring Apple Jacks, but now there is. Apparently, it still just tastes like sugar to me. But anyway, Wonder Woman. Hopefully soon a Captain Underpants review will come. I guess it's just a weekend of superheroes. But until then, Dragon Keeper 9600, signing off. That was the dorkiest way I've ever ended a video.